But it's very interesting that urbanization is a phenomenon of the modern world. That 200 years ago, about 3 to 7% of people lived in cities. We don't think about that. Most people lived in small villages. They lived in rural areas. 150 years ago in this country, 80% of the people were involved in agriculture, farming. 80%. By 1900, it was 37%. Today, it's 2%. And this is all from technology and the mechanization of our world. And so he was somebody that he thought very deeply about mechanization and automation. And he actually predicted many things because he was writing in the 60s. But he predicted this panopticon, all-surveilling society. So people who have known my work for a long time remember when I used to talk a lot about the Dajjal and panopticon and these things. Well, a lot of that was influenced by these writers about technology, because I read several books on the subject when I was very young. Autonomous Technology, Langdon Winter, Neil Postman heavily influenced me also. Jacques Ellul, a really, really brilliant philosopher of technology, probably wrote the single most important work on technologies that's still an important work, called The Technological Society or The Technological System. And what they understood was you can't introduce new technology into a society without it altering the society in very profound ways. And people don't think about it because there's this kind of determinism. This is a Marxist approach to the world, that everything, there's a hatmiya, there's a determinism to the world, that we're just simply going along for the ride and things are completely out of our control as a species. And the Muslims fall into that because of fatalism. You know, they will fall into that attitude of maktub, which is a good attitude about what happened, but not about what's about to happen. I mean, once something's happened, maktub, you just leave it and don't, it frees you from remorse. But if you take that attitude about your life, you won't accomplish anything. It's a completely defeating, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ, in an amazing hadith that Abu Dawud relates, where the Prophet ﷺ visited Ali and Fatima at the time of tahajjud. And he didn't find them in tahajjud, they were sleeping. And so he said to Sayyidina Ali, don't you get up at night? And Sayyidina Ali said, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes the souls. In other words, maktub. Tahajjud is maktub, and it wasn't maktub for us. And the Prophet didn't say anything, which is a very common response that you see in him, because he always let people think about things. His teaching was very often in how he responded than in what he said. And so he just turned away, struck his thigh, which Sayyidina Ali heard, and he said that, he quoted the verse of the Quran that says that وَكَانَ الْإِنسَانُ أَكْثَرَ شَيْءٍ جَدَلًا, that man is a very argumentative character. You know, instead of saying astaghfirullah, you're right, ya Rasulullah. So he's teaching his son-in-law. So that's a problem. But I wanted to talk a little bit about moon sighting. And every year we have this problem. It's just something that happens every year. The Usuli scholars, they say a sultan or a khalifa yarfa al-khilaf. You know, the authority removes khilaf. So if the sultan says we're fasting tomorrow, you know, generally people just do what the sultan says. And in the Muslim world, every country has its sightings. They have different criteria. Personally, I think the best country that I've seen consistently is Morocco, because they really do adhere to sound principles. And so they get it right pretty much every year. And then we see other, that either they have bionic eyes, or karamat, you know. But the Prophet ﷺ never went out and sighted the moon. There's no hadith that indicates he went out with the Sahaba and sighted the moon. He could see 12 stars in Pleiades. If you, and you can look this, not during Ramadan, you should get offline in Ramadan. But because fasting from this social media is really important. It'd be better if you just left it altogether, but at least during Ramadan, just avoid it. But anyway, you can see pictures of Pleiades that are done with amazing telescopes, and there are clearly 12 large stars in the constellation. There's actually over 80, but you can see 12 large ones. The human eye sees 7. Exceptional vision might see 8. So Qada Iyad in the Shifa said the Prophet saw 12. He had the vision of like a 40 times. If you had a telescope, he could see like 40 times what normal people could see. So he wouldn't go out and sight the moon because he would see the moon when nobody else could see it. And then if he said it was Ramadan, who is going to say it's not Ramadan? So in any case, I wanted to read this. It's from Lewis Mumford. It's a reflection of somebody who's quoting him. But he says, a person who reads a book or watches television or who glances at the watch is not usually interested in how his mind is organized and controlled by these events. Like, we don't really think about how the clock controls us, right? Like we said here, you know, this was going to start at 4:15. I think it might have been a little later than that. But in any case, so people have their watches. They say, oh, it's going to take me 20 minutes to get to Zaytuna. And then you get in your car. So this watch is determining. Now, in the pre-modern world, like in Mauritania, they still do this. They say, I'll see you after Asr. And they used to do like, I'll see you 3 juz after Asr, which would be about 45 minutes. In other words, they had a completely different way of telling time before the clock came into our lives. But people don't think about it. Still less in what idea of the world is suggested by a book, television, or a watch. Right? Because each one of those is a cultural artifact that affects how you view the world. But there are men and women who have noticed these things, especially in our own times. And these are called usually hukama. Because sages, you know, Shaykh Abdullah said two people live in wonder, children and sages. Because children, they're just, everything's amazing. I think cats have that quality too. But children have that quality because all new. But for the sage, it's still all new because kullu yawmin huwa fi sha'n. It's still new. So Lewis Mumford, for example, has been one of our great noticers. He is not the sort of man who looks at a clock merely to see what time it is. Not that he lacks interest in the content of clocks, which is of concern to everyone from moment to moment. But he is far more interested in how a clock creates the idea of moment to moment. He attends to the philosophy of clocks, to clocks as metaphor, about which our education has had little to say, and clockmakers nothing at all. The clock, Mumford has concluded, is a piece of power machinery whose product is seconds and minutes. In manufacturing such a product, the clock has the effect of disassociating time from human events, and thus nourishes the belief in an independent world of mathematically measurable sequences. Moment to moment, it turns out, is not God's conception or nature's. It is man conversing with himself about and through a piece of machinery he created. In Mumford's great book, Techniques in Civilization, he shows how beginning in the 14th century, the clock made us into timekeepers, and then time savers, and now time servers. In the process, we have learned irreverence toward the sun and the seasons, and we can include the moon. For in a world made up of seconds and minutes, the authority of nature is superseded. That's worth reading again. In the process, we have learned irreverence, lack of respect, toward the sun and the seasons. For in a world made up of seconds and minutes, the authority of nature is superseded. Indeed, as Mumford points out, with the invention of the clock, eternity ceased to serve as the measure and focus of human events. And thus, though few would have imagined the connection, the inexorable ticking of the clock may have had more to do with the weakening of God's supremacy than all the treatises produced by philosophers of the Enlightenment. That is to say, the clock introduced a new form of conversation between man and God, in which God appears, or the divine, the loss is on that side, because his servants turn away from his natural signs to their own made-up signs to determine how they worship him. Perhaps Moses should have included the commandment, you shouldn't make mechanical representations of time. So here we are. And those of us who have, for the last, I'm in my 50th year as a Muslim this year. And we've gone out almost every year, with rare exception, unless it was really raining or cloudy, to see new moons. And the joy of seeing a new moon is just amazing. And if you look at the book by Titus Burckhardt on the city of Fez, the city of Islam, he talks about how every Ramadan, on the 29th, they would all go out after completing 29 days. And he said all the people in Fez would be on their rooftops. The whole city. Looking at the horizon. And he said that slowly you would hear, Allahu Akbar! And then Allahu Akbar! And then Allahu Akbar! Until the whole city. It's amazing, just what a vision. The whole city, just rejoicing with the sighting of a new moon to celebrate Ramadan. But now we just check what's the calendar say? People don't think about these things, but people like Mumford thought about those things and gave us great insight